after I got that diagnosis, and I started focusing on joy, I kind of realized if I don't start showing people who I am really, I might never get the chance.
Hey everyone, don't forget to subscribe, like, share. We have a very special guest. We have Jenny Davies. Welcome.
Hi, Giuliano.
How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. So I had a pleasure of reading your background. It's inspiring, and some of the words that caught our attention was the word authenticity, and that's exactly what my wife and I have been trying to pursue in our conversations with people and professionals like yourself. I'll save the background introduction because I think it's inspiring for yourself to kind of introduce.
Okay.
But it's very simple. We get right into it. Where you came from, where you're at today, and where you see yourself going in the future. All right, so we'll start with where you came from.
All right, so for the last, 20-ish years, I've been working in healthcare finance, and I think that's kind of what you were talking about, where you came from. So professionally, I've been working in healthcare finance, and about 9 years ago, and actually it was right around this time of year, my career trajectory was interrupted, and what happened was I got a really scary and serious diagnosis that came really out of the blue. And it was so unexpected. And around the same time that I got this diagnosis, I had been planning on going to a reunion of a comedy and improv group that I had performed with in college. And I was looking forward to going to the reunion, but then when this diagnosis came, I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to pull it off. So I asked my nurse, actually before my surgery, would I be able to go? And she said, Jenny, I think you should plan to go and be with your friends and have fun. And so I had that kind of in the back of my mind. And it was probably less than 3 weeks after my surgery, my husband and I were able to go to that reunion. And it was so much fun now watching the kids in college doing improv, and then at a party afterward playing improv games. And in the moment, it was almost like I was watching myself having fun. And I was thinking, I want more of that. I want more laughter and more joy. I don't want to be thinking about this diagnosis. I don't want to be ruminating about what might happen. And I certainly don't want to belong to a support group where people are talking about their scary diagnoses. I just want to be laughing and having fun. And so on our way home the next day, I was in the car absolutely scheming about how could I join an improv group. And as a matter of fact, in the community where we live, there was an improv group for cancer survivors. Because of the pandemic, it no longer exists, but at the time it did. And so I called right away, I think it was before I started chemotherapy, and I joined this improv group. And so every Thursday evening, I would go and spend 2 hours with this really lovely, humble group of people. I'm pretty sure I was the only one in active treatment. And we would have belly laughs for like 2 hours. And that would sustain me, honestly, for going through what I knew I was up against. And so I went back to work eventually and worked 4 days a week. I didn't work on Wednesday because that was my chemo day. So I would go to chemo on Wednesday, I would bounce right back and go back to work on Thursday. Thursday evening, I would go to this improv group and we would, like I said, have belly laughs for a couple of hours. And what I realized is that for probably the first time in my life, I was focusing on joy. And the experience that I was having was that joy was expanding in my life. So at a moment that I was meeting my own mortality. There's no doubt about it. One of my doctors told me that I was in the 50-50 club. But my response was, I'm in the good 50. I'm not even thinking about that other 50. And she said, that's a really healthy way to look at it. And we want you to continue looking at it that way. And if something else needs to be done, then we're going to be here to support you through it. But anyway, I focused on joy. And like I said, joy just expanded in my life in ways that were completely unexpected to me. And so even after I finished my treatment, it was almost as though I caught this bug that I wanted more and more laughter and joy. It was almost like, and I've described it this way to other people, like I was gobbling up joy, like I couldn't get enough. And so I started taking improv classes through Happier Valley Comedy School, which is in Hadley, Massachusetts now, and performing in some of their shows. And so I started learning improv from more of really a learning trajectory, learning some of the skills behind it instead of just being silly and having fun. And so I've learned, a little bit more of the discipline behind it, but still experiencing the joy. And I think, like for me, laughing and having fun, it's almost more of a mindfulness practice than like meditating would be. For me it is anyway, because I'm lost in the moment in a way that I'm not when I'm meditating.
Makes you feel good.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah, the whole joy part of that conversation right there, the belly laughing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's so important, and just kind of reading through some of your background and you sharing some of your experience, how important it is to share those human moments with people. And so then my question would be, as you started to realize you were facing this kind of 50-50 chance, you said, I'm on the positive side of that 50 chance. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important, is we need to be on the positive side of mm-hmm. whatever information comes our way all the time. And I think you're a living proof of that. Is you're faced daily, hourly, minutely in today's world with so much information, and it can be devastating all the time if we think about it in a negative sense. Instead, you're a prime example of taking it and saying, no, where's the positive in this? And you came out a superstar. I mean, really.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know where it came from, Giuliano. I'm a person of deep faith. I would definitely say that about myself, but I don't even know where it came from. And I don't want to brag, because I don't feel like it really even has anything to do with me. I think it was a gift that was given to me to have that strength in the moment. It was something that was, I don't think it was me. I think it was God acting through me. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but I think that it was something bigger than me showing up that day. And I would say, like, even in the moment when I was told, you're in the 50-50 club, I just thought, I don't think I'm going to die of this, because I don't think God is done with me.
Yeah. It's powerful. I think God works in mysterious ways, and you're right. He brings people in different experiences in our lives, so that way we can hopefully share our struggles and our triumphs, to hopefully gain other people's attention to direct them towards mm-hmm. who's important.
Yeah, and when you started the conversation, you started talking about authenticity, and I feel like that I'd love to circle back on that, because it has a little bit to do with where I came from. So I would say honestly about myself, without a doubt, I work in a rather conservative profession in healthcare finance. And especially in certain circumstances before my diagnosis, I would have intentionally stuffed down a lot of the sparkle that you see in my personality. I would have dressed more conservatively, definitely wore my hair more conservatively, and presented myself in a way that made me feel like I would fit in a little bit better. But after I got that diagnosis, and I started focusing on joy, I kind of realized if I don't start showing people who I am really, I might never get the chance. So I don't really do that anymore. I don't filter as much of that sparkle as I used to. So I would say that that's kind of how authenticity shows for me, is that I don't stuff that down anymore.
Wow. Yeah. I would say that's powerful. A lot of people will suppress that.
Mm-hmm. Right. We're trying to fit in, and it's like a completely normal thing to want to fit in. And it was normal for me too, and I knew that it was normal. And I actually knew that when I started showing that sparkle that I was taking a risk. But it didn't really matter to me about fitting in anymore. I felt like I needed to live in a more authentic, true way, because if I don't do it now, I might not ever get the chance.
So if we can just give our audience a kind of a time frame, this is leading up all to 2015.
Yeah, so what I just described happened in 2015, yeah.
And so prior to 2015, you had been working as a healthcare financier for about 7 or 8 years?
Maybe longer than that, let's see. Maybe not 15 years, but maybe a good 10 years, yeah.
So about 10 or so more years.
Yeah.
Then you're hit with this diagnosis, and at this point, you're given the 50-50 chance. You're telling others and your doctors, I'm on the positive side. Hey, although I'm in this conservative world, as far as finance is concerned.
Yeah, and I will say, honestly, I don't think from the beginning I was thinking positively, so I'm just going to tell you, this is what happened. So I had no idea that there was a thing wrong with me when I got this diagnosis. It really came completely out of the blue. And what happened was that year I'd had an abnormal mammogram. And so the radiology practice wanted me to follow up, or the doctor that read the mammogram wanted me to follow up with a diagnostic mammogram. And I had a breast biopsy maybe like 10 years before that. So I wasn't really thrilled about going back and doing that. And so I was kind of delaying, quite honestly. I was kind of delaying what was coming next. And so I said, I really would like to follow up with my primary care practitioner before I do the next step. And so they said, okay. So I did schedule that appointment with my primary care provider, a nurse practitioner that I had seen over the years for at least 10 years. We had known each other. So I made the appointment and went in. And when I was there for the appointment, we were talking about, the breast health, and she was encouraging me, definitely go and get those next tests done. And while I was there, she did the internal exam that she would ordinarily do. And she said, Jenny, I want you to follow up with an abdominal ultrasound because I'm feeling something kind of pressing down on your cervix. And strange as it might seem, I wasn't really worried about what she was telling me because I'd had fibroids before. And so I just figured it was another fibroid. And not like I brushed it off, but it just didn't seem as urgent as the next step with the diagnostic mammograms. So I asked her, is it okay if I put this off for a month? Would that be all right? And she said, yes, that would be fine. And so I intentionally scheduled that diagnostic ultrasound, the abdominal ultrasound, for a month later on the same day that I was taking my mom to her appointments because, you're trying to fit it all in. And so I went for that appointment a month later, and thinking that it was just a routine test, they were going to look at my fibroids and make some kind of recommendation. But what happened was while I was sitting in the exam room, the ultrasound tech was really quiet. And I'm kind of chatty, and I was asking her a bunch of questions. And she wasn't really forthcoming with information, but I just thought that she just wasn't forthcoming with information. So when she was all done, I got up and got dressed in the next room. And when I came out, there was another person standing over the computer monitor in the exam room. And I actually thought they were getting ready for the next patient, and I was getting ready to leave. And the other person, who I'd not met before, turned around and she said, "Hi," and she introduced herself as my doctor. And I said, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And she said, "I want you to sit down. I have some information that I need to share with you." So I sat down, and she pulled her chair up close to me, and she said, "I have to share with you that the ultrasound revealed a large," and she was holding her hands like this, "a large mass in your abdomen. We think it's on the right ovary, but it's pushing everything over, so it could be on the left ovary." And I could almost kind of feel myself floating up out of my body, like I was completely disconnected. And I had to stop her, and I said, "I'm not processing information very well. I need you to just slow down a little bit and write these things down for me." And so before I left the building, I was sent for some blood tests, and then I was referred to a gynecologic oncologist. So, if that wouldn't blow you away, I walked into the building thinking that I was perfectly healthy, and now I'm like shaking in my boots, thinking like I don't know what's coming next. So then I had to take my then nearly 90-year-old mother to her appointment, and I couldn't tell my mother anything because we didn't really know anything yet, and I didn't want to scare her. And so sometime during that day while I was with my mother, I checked my voicemail messages, and the doctor was calling, and she shared with me that one of those blood tests came back with an elevated level. And in that moment, I was thinking, oh, how much life insurance do I have, and how many years left to pay off our mortgage? Because I was feeling my own mortality in that moment. And I'm pretty sure it was a Thursday, and I had a painting class on Thursday. And so I dropped my mother off, or maybe my brother was picking my mother up from her appointment. But anyway, I got home and I picked up my stuff for painting class, and I went to my painting class that night. And my brain was completely distracted. I had a terrible time, like focusing on what I was doing. And when I got home, it's a really long day. The end of that really long day, I can still kind of picture myself opening the door and going in to tell my husband this news. And I knew as soon as I shared this news with my husband that our lives were never going to be the same again. I just had that feeling. And so, so when I got home, he started talking about my mother, because you know how mothers are. It can be challenging to spend the day with your mom, right? and it can be, right? And so he was asking me about how was your day with your mother, and so I was telling him about what went on that day, and then I said, "Okay, I have to share some news with you, and I just need you to listen to me, and then just let me finish." And then, you can say whatever it is that you want. So I shared the news with him, and I'm sure, beside myself. I was bawling. And he said, "You know what, Jenny? We don't know anything yet." And he totally calmed me down. And he was like, "We don't know anything yet." And I said, "Well, you're right. But we know one thing. We know that I'm going to have surgery, because they're not going to leave that big thing inside me." And he goes, "Okay, we know that. That's what we know."
No, thank you for sharing. I think it's important because a lot of people think that every day we can perform at 100%. And what people don't realize is that sometimes life comes and punches us in the face with certain information. And in your case, it was a punch in the face given the scenario you were put in with your mother at your side. Sounds like you had the appointment, then your mother had the appointment later on that day. And so I can only imagine, not to spook your mother at 90, you're trying to digest everything, right? And it's always like, well, couldn't have this just waited until I drop, in your case, my mother off, later on in the day, maybe get the phone call, maybe I'm home, maybe, you know what I mean, I can digest this better. But I think it's important because ultimately you came out on top. Again, I want to keep reiterating that. You came out on top, and we're going to dig into that even further. But I think it's important that people understand that we are humans. And yes, when you're young and you have a lot of energy, you can do a lot. One person can do a lot. You can operate at 100% to a degree for an extended period of time until you can't. You can just get some sleep, maybe come back at it, a couple energy drinks. But the point that I'm trying to make is that we're all human, and these scenarios come out of left field, and they knock you off your course. And now you had all these plans, and now you have to deal with the health issue. How does this affect everything you had planned? It's the beginning of the new year or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is important. I think it's great that you're sharing this, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Honestly, I've shared my story a lot because early on, I recognized how well I was doing, and I had never heard of anybody that felt well, like while we're going through chemotherapy. That was a total revelation to me, that I felt well enough to work, and felt incredibly blessed that I felt well enough to work. And I just thought, this is really something that I shouldn't be keeping to myself. So I've shared it a lot.
So we start from where you came from, and you gave a little bit of background, but maybe for the audience's sake, where are you from originally? Where were you born?
I was born here in Western Massachusetts.
Okay. And my wife and I are really trying to spend time to highlight this area and these stories and have them resonate with a lot of people in this area. So this is great. Okay, so now, you're working through, you're in finance in the healthcare industry, roughly 10 or so years, 2015, get diagnosed with this. What happens? I mean, do you tell your work? I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, so about a week after that ultrasound, my husband and I had an appointment with a gynecologic oncologist. So of course we didn't know really anything until we had this appointment with the gynecologic oncologist. And so we went in, and he came with me to that appointment. I definitely needed the support. And I'm telling you, I was completely unprepared for what I was about to hear. So she shared with me that mass was laying on a portion of my bowel. So in addition to needing a hysterectomy and to have that large tumor taken out, there was a very real possibility that I was going to need an ostomy. And so hearing all of this news, it totally overwhelmed me. And in her office, I had a complete meltdown. Like I did the ugly cry that you never want anybody in your life to see. And I think it overwhelmed even the healthcare professionals that were in the room, because the doctor and the nurse and the medical fellow that were there all got up and left the room, I think to allow me to collect myself. And so my husband was the only one that was there in the room with me, and he stayed to comfort me in that moment. And so it was at that point that I really had more of an understanding, or after that moment, that I really had more of an understanding of, oh my gosh, this is what I'm up against. And now I know a little bit more. Like, I didn't know walking in there if I was going to need like a robotic surgery or what it was going to be, but now knowing the extent, it was going to be a really complex surgery that I was going to need to, and the doctor told me even at that first meeting, you're going to need to be out of work for at least 8 weeks. So 8 weeks, I was like, really, 8 weeks? I've never been out of work for 8 weeks before. So I went back to work that day to tell the person that I reported to I'm going to need to take a medical leave. And they think that my surgery will be scheduled sometime in the next 3 weeks, but they don't really know exactly when. And the person that I reported to was so incredibly generous and supportive. And she said, you know what, Jenny, you do whatever you need. I'll give you the information about, what the next steps are to get you set up for a medical leave. Don't worry about a thing here. We're here to support you. And so I did feel incredibly supported, and I knew my husband was there to support me as well.
That's so rare to find in today's world, supervisors that are caring in receiving that type of news. I was totally expecting something different, but I applaud that supervisor.
Yeah, she was incredibly generous and supportive.
Hey everyone, don't forget to subscribe, like, share.